They say silence makes you invisible. In this house, it made me disposable. My knees ached against the cold marble floor as I scrubbed under the long, winding staircase. The citrus scent of the cleaner burned my nose, but I liked it because it masked the stench of mockery that drifted through the halls. I could hear their heels clicking above me, echoing like taunts from the ceiling. Laughter spilled down the hallway, high-pitched, careless, moneyed. Clarice Delacroix, the daughter of the house, was probably twirling in some new designer dress, the kind she only wore once before tossing it in a donation bag I wasn't even allowed to touch. Did she miss a spot? Clarice's voice rang out like nails on glass. Maybe next time we'll get her a toothbrush. My hands paused over the mop handle. I didn't look up, never did. Then came Madame Evelyn, the woman who'd inherited her money and perfected the art of pretending not to see people like me. Her heels stopped just beside me, the hem of her expensive silk pants brushing my arm. Nothing, not a glance, not a word, just the scent of Chanel. No, 5, and entitlement. Behind her trailed Julian, her son, the one who once held my hand in the rose garden when we were teenagers, before the family told him he was ruining his chances by talking to the help. Now, he barely nodded when we crossed paths, like I was a ghost in a uniform that day. I was assigned to the garden party, a brunch for Evelyn's charity, Women's Empowerment Through Art. The irony was lost on no one but them. I carried trays of sparkling lemonade and smoked salmon past a sea of pastel dresses and fake laughter. No one saw me. They saw my tray. They saw their reflection in my polished shoes. But they didn't see me until Clarice did, and she never missed an opportunity. She was perched on the armrest of a patio chair, surrounded by her Ivy League rejects and trust fund parasites. "Isn't it kind of poetic?" she said loudly, twirling her champagne flute. "She lives here, but she doesn't belong here." Her voice was coated in sugar and venom. Her friends giggled. Then she leaned forward and delivered the blow. "Girls like her clean our floors, not own homes." The tray in my hands almost tipped. The words landed like cold water on my spine. My cheeks flushed, but I didn't flinch. I bowed my head, adjusted the tray, and kept walking. Because I'd heard it all before. In that house, I was always less than. Less than the family, less than the guests. Less than the dog that wore designer collars and ate from porcelain bowls. But I never let them see the storm behind my eyes. Never let them see the blueprint in my mind. Because every insult, every cold glance, every humiliation, I was storing them like bricks. And one day I'd use them to build a kingdom. That night, when the party ended and the music died down, I stood in the backyard under the fairy lights. The chairs were empty now. The glasses half full and forgotten. The garden smelled like trampled roses. I looked up at the mansion. The lights in Evelyn's room flickered on. Clarice's laughter echoed faintly from the balcony. This place, this life, their world, I'd never belong in it. Not by invitation, but maybe, just maybe I could take it. I sat on the garden steps. The stone cool beneath me. My uniform was stained with wine, and my hands smelled like bleach, but my heart, it was on fire. I remembered something my mother used to say when we lost our home. "You can lose everything, Amira, but don't lose yourself. They can laugh now, but one day you'll walk into a room and they'll choke on their pride." She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. Even when I became a maid in the very house that destroyed her. My mother had once owned a quaint cafe before Evelyn's husband scammed her into signing over her business rights in some shady land deal. We lost everything: home, money, dignity. And when my mother died coughing in a charity hospital bed, swore I'd never be that helpless again. That oath became my armor. That night, I opened the browser on my cheap phone. I started typing how to invest in real estate with no money. And that's when it began. Not my job. Not my journey, my war. It started with a YouTube video. Some woman in Florida talking about house hacking, flipping foreclosed homes, and leveraging credit instead of cash. I watched it twice that night on my creaky twin bed in the staff quarters, volume low, eyes wide. I didn't even know what leverage meant, but I wrote it down like gospel. That became my nightly routine. Clean all day, study all night. No parties, no friends. No weekends. Just bleach by day and billionaires by midnight. Every penny I earned went into a separate account. 1. Clarice once jokingly called my tip jar for dreams. I called it Freedom Fund. By month 3, I had $1,100, enough to take an online real estate course. I hid the receipt under the mattress like it was contraband. That course changed everything. It taught me that rich people don't use money. They use information, loopholes, leverage. They don't work harder. They think smarter. While I scrubbed their toilets, they were borrowing against their second homes to buy their third. I didn't sleep for days because, for the first time in years, I didn't feel poor. I felt dangerous. At work, nothing changed on the surface. But inside me, everything had cracked open. I moved more silently, listened more carefully, absorbed their conversations like a sponge. When Evelyn's friends visited, I eavesdropped on their investment gossip. When Julian came home with his banking friends, I memorized the terms they used. Did you see that foreclosure on Whitmore Lane? Pulled equity from the cabin, got lucky, flipped it in 6 weeks. Profit was sweet. Whitmore Lane. That name stuck. One night, I biked to that neighborhood after my shift. The houses there looked tired. The lawns were half dead. But there was one place at the end of the cul-de-sac, boarded windows, tall weeds, a foreclosure notice. Peeling off the door, my hands trembled as I took a photo. The next day, on my break, I Googled the address. It was up for auction, starting bid $4,000. $4,000, $4,000, and I could own a home, not live in one by someone's permission, not sleep under their rules, but own. My heart thundered. There was just one problem. I didn't have $4,000. Not yet, so I doubled my shifts, took extra cleaning gigs at night. On weekends, I folded laundry for neighbors. I cleaned gutters. I taught Spanish to a rich mom's spoiled child for $20 an hour. 2 months later, I had $4,032, and I had never been more terrified. Auction day was cold and gray. I wore my only decent coat and stood in the back of the courthouse room, surrounded by men in tailored suits, all speaking in numbers like it was a second language. When the bidding started, I could barely breathe. The house on Whitmore Lane came. Opening bid, $4,000. Silence. The men flipped through their paperwork. No one raised their hand. No one wanted it. My fingers trembled as I raised mine. Bidder 401, the clerk said, going once, going twice. Sold. And just like that, I owned a house. Not a mansion, not even a livable space. But it was mine, and I didn't clean floors to get it. I outworked them, outsmarted them. I'd played their game and won a tiny corner of the board. When I biked home that night, tears froze on my cheeks. I didn't tell anyone, not Evelyn, not Clarice, not Julian, especially not Julian. They didn't ask why I seemed lighter. Spade never noticed. But every night, I biked to my house and worked. I watched DIY videos to fix plumbing. I painted the walls myself, tore out old carpet, learned how to install tile from a retired handyman I met at the hardware store. I made mistakes. I bruised my fingers. I cried in frustration, but I kept going, because every stroke of paint whispered, "You're not a housemaid. You're a homeowner." 6 months later, I sold that house for $18,000. I didn't scream when the wire hit my account. I sat in silence and stared at the screen like it would vanish. It stayed, and with it, the fire inside me roared. This wasn't just luck. This was proof. I flipped another house, then another. I got a mentor, took out a small loan, learned about LLCs, property taxes, Silent partners. I reinvested every dime. By the time Clarice hosted her 27th birthday white party, I had 4 rental units and a 5th under contract. She didn't even look at me when I poured her drink. But I looked at her. And for the first time I pitied her, because her empire was borrowed. Her wealth inherited. Mine. Built. Brick by bloody brick. And I wasn't done yet. It was a strange thing walking into the same luxury auction house where I once cleaned windows. The floors gleamed, but this time I wasn't polishing them. I was walking on them, wearing black heels, a fitted blazer I bought secondhand, and confidence stitched tighter than my thrifted seams. My name tag didn't say staff. It said investor. And for the first time, people looked at me, not through me. There were men in suits flipping through glossy brochures, sipping espresso like it was part of some ritual. Women in heels clicking across marble tiles. All Botox smiles and bored eyes. And then there was me. Still the same girl who used to scrub toilet bowls for Evelyn and Julian Whitmore. But now with 5 properties under my name and a new goal in mind, a mansion on East Grand. Julian's neighborhood, their neighborhood. The listing had come up 2 weeks earlier. A foreclosure. The owners had defaulted on 3 loans. No heirs to fight it in court. The mansion sat abandoned for a year. Overgrown ivy climbing the gates like secrets refusing to stay buried. I stared at the listing every night. Memorized every photo. 10 bedrooms. Marble floors. A sunroom. A spiral staircase. And an empty echo, just begging to be filled with something new. The reserve price was $290,000. I had $320,000 saved. It would wipe me out. Every cent I'd built, every drop of sweat I'd poured into my business, gone in one move. But I didn't flinch, because this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about proof. Proof that I could go from mopping their mess to owning a seat at their table. Proof that I wasn't just a housemaid with ambition. I was the storm they didn't see coming. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Next property up, 104 East Grand. My palms turned clammy. I looked around the room. 2 bidders ahead of me. One in a gray suit, tapping his phone. The other a woman with pearls and sharp eyes. She looked like Evelyn Leminer. Opening bid, $290,000. Pearls raised her paddle immediately. $290. Gray suit followed. $300. I took a breath and raised mine. $310. Pearls narrowed her eyes. $320, she said, lips tight. My chest tightened. That was all I had. Gray suit hesitated, then dropped out. It was just her and me now. $320 going once. I didn't blink. Going twice. Pearls lifted her paddle butt, then she paused. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. Her face changed, confused, then annoyed. She shook her head slightly and lowered her hand. Sold to bidder 218. Congratulations. The gavel dropped. I stood frozen. The room clapped politely, but all I could hear was the roar of blood in my ears. My fingers were numb. My knees weak. I had done it. I owned a mansion on East Grand, right down the street from the Whitmores, the next day. I walked up the steps of my new home with the deed in my bag and tears threatening to spill. The place was a mess. Silent, full of echoes and broken chandeliers. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I walked from room to room, tracing my fingers across doorframes, kicking up dust in the hallways where once people must have laughed and lived and dreamed. It wasn't just a house. It was a statement that I had risen, quietly, slowly, but completely. And now, I wanted them to see it too. A week later, Evelyn stopped by. I didn't invite her. She was walking past with her yoga friends, gossiping in their Lululemon uniforms, when she caught sight of me standing at the gate directing painters at me. At first, she didn't recognize me. Then I saw the shift in her face. Recognition, confusion, then disbelief. Maya, she called, sunglasses dropping slightly. I smiled. casually adjusting my clipboard. "Evelyn," she blinked, her friends whispering behind her. "What are you doing here?" I looked at the fresh white paint going up the columns. "Just renovating." "I closed on this place last week." Silence. She laughed, dry and unsure. "Oh, so you work for someone here?" "No," I said, tilting my head. "I own it." Her smile froze. I could see her mind spinning, calculating, questioning, trying to put together how a maid who once folded her underwear now owned a mansion beside hers. She glanced at her friends, then back at me. "Well, congratulations. That's impressive," she said tightly. "Thank you," I replied, calm and steady. "You were a great teacher." She looked puzzled. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I learned what not to become." And with that, I turned and walked through the gates. This time, closed them behind me. If the gate creak didn't catch the neighbor's attention, the valet service certainly did. 3 days after Evelyn's run-in with me, word had already spread down east, grand like wildfire. It was like I had punched a hole in their perfect sky, and the storm they pretended didn't exist had moved in. Everyone wanted to know, who was this girl who bought the Caldwell mansion? Why was she renovating it? And more importantly, could a former housemaid afford it? But I didn't answer questions. I threw a housewarming party. Not just any party, the kind I once used to serve at. The kind I used to peek at from behind swinging kitchen doors, wondering what it felt like to laugh that loud, sip champagne that expensive, and wear gowns that made your body float like a secret. Now it was my name on the invitations. Initials printed in gold leaf on the napkins. And the best part? I invited everyone, including the ones who doubted me the most. On the night of the party, I stood at the top of the grand staircase wearing a deep red silk gown I'd bought in Paris last year during a renovation conference. My natural curls were pinned up in a way that made me feel powerful, like royalty. Soft jazz floated through the halls, champagne flutes clinked, and laughter bubbled up from rooms that used to echo with nothing but abandonment. Not inherited, moved like a dream. I've trained every one of them myself, taught them respect, grace, and dignity. They weren't invisible. They were proud. I didn't just want them to serve well, I wanted them to feel seen, the way I never did. Evelyn and Julian arrived late, of course. They always did when they weren't the center of attention. She was dressed in a pale blue gown, her pearls tight against her throat. Julian had that same fake smile I remembered from every Sunday brunch I served while their friends asked if I spoke English. Their eyes swept over the crowd, the city councilmen, realtors, architects, even a few influencers, then finally landed on me. I saw it. The disbelief, the discomfort, the loss of control. They walked up slowly, like they were approaching royalty. I didn't descend the stairs to greet them. They came up. "You certainly transformed the place," Julian muttered. Evelyn looked around, her smile thinner than the glass in her hand, almost unrecognizable. I smiled back, letting the silence say what I wouldn't. "That's the point. I always believed this house deserved more," I said softly. "More than secrets, more than judgment, more than being used to show off wealth without heart." Julian chuckled nervously. "You speak like someone who's always known this life." I met his eyes. "That's because I've seen both sides." Evelyn's jaw twitched. "Well," she said coldly, "we won't keep you. Enjoy your celebration." As they turned to leave, I added, just loud enough for them to hear, "You know, Evelyn, the maid's room. I converted it into a library." She stopped mid-step. "Books do more for the soul than gossip ever did." She said nothing, just walked away, shoulders stiff, pride cracking. As the night stretched on, I moved through the rooms like someone who finally belonged. My fingers brushed against polished walls I used to scrub, only now they shimmered under golden light and clean energy. I stepped into the ballroom and saw something that made me freeze. My old friend, Lena, one of the housemaids from another home I used to clean. She was standing near the dessert table in a simple navy dress. wide-eyed and uncertain. She looked exactly how I once felt, out of place. I walked up to her and took her hand. "You're not here to serve, Lena," I said warmly. "You're here to shine." She looked down, embarrassed. "I almost didn't come. I didn't think that you belonged." I finished for her. "That's what they want you to think." I led her to a group of designers and real estate investors and introduced her as my guest. The smile that bloomed on her face stayed with me for the rest of the night. By midnight, the mansion was alive with laughter, music, and the scent of vanilla candles and success. I stood once again on the grand staircase, looking over the sea of people, thinking about the version of me who once cried in the broom closet after Evelyn threw her dirty towel at me. I didn't become this woman out of revenge. I became her out of resilience. I didn't buy a mansion to hurt anyone. I bought it to rewrite the story, to reclaim every inch of space that once tried to shrink me. They said I'd never be more than a housemaid. But I was now a homeowner, a business owner, a mentor, a legend on East Grand. A week after the party, I received a call I never expected. It was from a well-known podcast host, Maya Nolan, a powerhouse journalist known for interviewing CEOs, innovators, and survivors. She had seen clips of the party floating on social media, specifically one where Evelyn Caldwell had walked away from me looking like she'd swallowed nails. "Your story's causing a stir," Maya said. "We'd love to feature you on Reclaimed. The episode would be titled From Maid to Mogul." I paused, even now. After all the progress I'd made, the title made my stomach tighten. Maid. That word still echoed with the sting of days. When people refused to look me in the eyes only, at my apron. "I'm not sure," I murmured. "It feels like I'd be giving too much." Maya didn't rush me. She just said, "Sometimes telling your truth doesn't take from you. Sometimes it gives power to others." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Lena, about other women like her working long hours, being told they were just background noise in someone else's story. Maybe it was time someone turned up the volume. The studio was modern, sleek, but warm. No judgment in the air, just curiosity and light. Maya was kind, disarming. She began soft. "Tell us about your childhood." I spoke of the small town I grew up in, raised by a mother who worked 3 jobs and still came home with cracked heels and an open heart. A woman who told me, "We may scrub floors, but our dreams don't have to stay on them." Then came the harder questions. What was it like, being treated as invisible? I hesitated. The memories came in flashes. Evelyn tossing her jewelry at me like I was a table. Julian pretending not to hear my good morning. The loneliness, the silence. "There were days," I said slowly, "I forgot the sound of my own voice." Maya's eyes softened. "And now?" she asked. I smiled. "Now I don't whisper anymore." After the interview aired, things exploded. Messages poured in. From women in Brazil, Ghana, India, the Philippines. All of them saying the same thing in different languages. "You reminded me that I'm not small. I needed this. Going to start over." Even strangers on the street stopped me. "I heard you on Reclaimed." I cried. "Your story." It felt like mine. For the first time, my success didn't feel like a shield. It felt like a bridge. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. A week later, I received a letter handwritten. Neat. CURSIVE. Congratulations on your moment. I hope you remember where you came from. Fame has a short fuse. I folded the note and placed it gently into the fireplace. Where I came from. I came from grit, humility, strength. Not mansions, not pearls, not bitterness disguised as etiquette. And if fame had a short fuse, didn't need it, because I wasn't chasing spotlight anymore. I was building my own light source. 2 months later, I'd launched something I had dreamt of for years. The Elevate Foundation, a mentorship and housing program for domestic workers trying to build new futures: nurses, bakers, coders, architects. We offered scholarships, safe housing, and mentorship from women who'd once stood exactly where they sat. At our first orientation, I looked around the room and saw women wiping tears from their eyes as I spoke. This house used to shrink me. Now it shelters people with purpose. The applause felt like healing one evening. As I walked through the hallways of my home, past the refurbished maid quarters, the sunlit library, the guest wing, I paused outside the old wine cellar. It had been converted into an art room. Paintings lined the walls made by kids of the women in our program. One drawing caught my eye. It was a little girl holding a mop in one hand and a crown in the other. I stood there for a long time, my throat tight. That little girl, she was me. That night I opened my journal, one I had kept since my maid days. I flipped through the pages, so many dreams, so much pain, and I wrote one more entry. They said I'd never be more than a housemaid. But here I am, writing from a mansion I bought with dignity, pain, and power. I built a life that doesn't apologize. And I'll keep building until every woman who was ever told she wasn't enough knows she is. The invitation never came. It was Evelyn Caldwell's annual winter gala, the one she threw like clockwork, boasting velvet gowns, gourmet wine, and carefully curated guest lists. In the past, I would have served at those parties. Quiet, efficient, wearing a black uniform and tight-lipped smile while watching women in diamonds laugh like they owned the world now. I did own a slice of that world, but apparently not the right one. I found out about the gala from Lena, who had left the Caldwell estate shortly after I did. She was now managing her own catering company, one I quietly funded. "They're calling it the return of the real elite," she said with a snort over coffee. "And I take it I'm not part of that real elite?" She shook her head. "You're too real. That's the problem." We both laughed, but a hollow feeling settled in my chest. It shouldn't have mattered. I had success, a foundation, and a purpose. Still, something about that cold exclusion stung. I had cleaned their silverware, polished their floors. I had endured their whispered insults while they clinked champagne glasses, and now they couldn't bear to clink glasses near me, even if I owned the damn vineyard that produced the wine they served. The night of the gala, I stayed home. At first, I curled up with hot chocolate and a blanket, the fireplace crackling as soft jazz played in the background. But my heart felt restless. Lena texted updates. They just brought out caviar. Julian just arrived with his new fiancée. Looks like a porcelain doll. Everyone's talking about that maid with a mansion. You're the ghost haunting their dinner. I laughed, but it wasn't amusement. It was a bitter chuckle wrapped in old scars. That's when I decided not to crash the gala. No. I would never beg for entry into a room I wasn't respected in, but I could remind them that no gate was high enough to keep the truth out. I grabbed my laptop and opened my email. I had been sitting on something for weeks and exposed that one of Evelyn's former assistants had sent me anonymously. Invoices, correspondence, hidden abuse. Turns out the Caldwell Foundation, Evelyn's pride and joy, was siphoning donor funds through shell companies owned by her son. The documents were airtight. I had held off from publishing them, not because I feared backlash, but because I didn't want to become the kind of person who fought dirt with dirt. But now I realized this wasn't about revenge. It was about reckoning. By morning, it was everywhere. Elite philanthropist Evelyn Caldwell under investigation for fraud. The House of Caldwell may finally crumble. The fallout was instant. Reporters lined up outside their gates. Sponsors pulled out. Donations dried up. Julian's company stock dropped 14% in one day. And me, I didn't have to say a word. People started connecting the dots on their own. The woman they once ignored, dismissed, degraded, had risen not by destroying them, but by becoming undeniable. A week later, Maya Nolan invited me back for a follow-up. "How do you feel?" she asked. Vindicated. I took a breath. "No," I said honestly, "I feel responsible." I didn't publish those files out of spite. I did it because too many women like me maids, nannies, janitors are abused behind closed doors in big houses. I wanted to say enough. The response to that episode was even bigger than the first. My inbox filled with stories. Women speaking out. Whistleblowers stepping forward. The media called it the maid movement, but I just called it the beginning. 3 months passed. One morning, I walked out to my porch to find a small box. No note. No name. Inside was a bracelet I remembered well, Evelyn's, a thick gold cuff engraved with the words "Born Better." I laughed out loud. It wasn't an apology, it was surrender. That day, I hosted a gathering at my mansion, but not a gala. We called it the Grounded Gala, a celebration for the helpers, not the heirs. Women came in sneakers and saris aprons, and overalls. We danced in the garden. Ate food made by women who once cooked in silence. Told stories that had never been heard. At the center of it all, I placed Evelyn's bracelet on a pedestal with a plaque, a relic of what was, a reminder of what will never be again. As the sun dipped and lanterns lit up the lawn, a young girl named Amara, daughter of one of our members, tugged my sleeve. "Miss Rose?" she asked shyly. "Yes, sweetheart." "Did you really used to clean houses?" "Yes, I did." "But now you own one." I knelt so we were eye to eye. "I don't just own it, Amara. I transformed it. And one day, you'll transform the world too." She grinned and hugged me, and in that moment, I felt something deeper than revenge, something louder than vindication. Legacy. I was planting jasmine when the knock came, hands in soil, sunlight warming my neck, the scent of blossoms all around. My had found peace in the rhythm of small things, the kind of peace I had once believed was only reserved for them. The old version of me would have rushed to the door in fear, apron still tied, heart thudding at the thought of displeasing someone important. Now I walked to it slowly, deliberately. When I opened the door, the last person I expected to see was Julian Caldwell. Same posture, same polished shoes, but his eyes, it's different. Like someone who'd finally understood what it meant to fall. "May I come in?" he asked, voice low. I studied him. The last time I'd seen Julian was from a distance, flanked by lawyers, ducking cameras, trying to spin a public image that was shattering with every news cycle. I stepped aside, not because I owed him kindness, but because I needed to look him in the eye and see for myself what guilt looked like. He didn't sit until I did. Always the charmer, even when stripped of power. "You've redecorated," he said, glancing around the living room. "I did more than redecorate," I replied. "I reclaimed it." He nodded, silent. "Then I didn't know." I blinked. "Didn't know what?" "How badly they treated you." "My mother, my sister, me." I leaned back. "You didn't care to know?" His face flinched. He wasn't there for forgiveness. He couldn't be. This wasn't the kind of betrayal that could be washed away with crocodile tears and tea. "Why are you here, Julian?" He looked up then, eyes finally meeting mine, to say, "Thank you." Now that I hadn't expected, he continued, "That expose you published. It didn't just ruin the foundation. It forced me to look at everything, what I built, what I stood for, who I let become my mirror. And who is that? Coward?" There was something different about him. Was it regret? Shame? A man seeing himself for the first time. After the mask was ripped away, "You were always better than we were," he said. "We just didn't want to admit it." I didn't respond, because I didn't need their validation anymore. But hearing it still healed something raw in me. Julian reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the table. "These are the keys to the cabin in Vermont. It's yours now." I stared at him. "You're giving me property?" "No," he said softly. "I'm returning a debt, one you paid in silence." I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "You think this changes anything?" "No," he replied quickly, "but maybe it opens something. A door, a conversation." A different ending than the one we wrote. After he left, I sat on the porch and held the envelope in my hand. It wasn't about the cabin. It was about closure. For years, I had walked through life waiting for someone to hand me validation. Now they were offering it like a confession. But the truth, I didn't need it anymore because I had something more powerful than their guilt. I had freedom. Later that night, I journaled like I always did, not about revenge, not about what they took, but about what I'd rebuilt. Today, the boy who never saw me came back as a man haunted by what he missed. He brought keys, but I already have doors they can't lock me out of anymore. The next morning, I visited the old neighborhood. The apartment I had once rented was still standing, faded blue door, broken mailbox, smell of fried food in the hallway. I knocked on 3B. Mrs. Alvarez answered. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Mia, is that really you?" "It's me." She pulled me into a hug that felt like time folding in on itself. I spent the afternoon there reading empanadas, listening to her stories. Watching kids chase each other down the same stairwell I used to drag my tired body up after long shifts. As I was leaving, she squeezed my hand. "They tried to bury you," she said, voice fierce. "But you were a seed." I smiled, eyes brimming. She was right. They called me housemaid, but now I was building homes. Not just for myself, but for others like me. That night, I stood on the balcony of my mansion, watching the city lights shimmer like stars fallen. To earth. Behind me, silence ahead. Legacy, they had once said. I'd never be more than the dirt on their marble floors. Now their mansions stood on land I owned, and I wasn't done yet. The invitation arrived in a gold-trimmed envelope, sealed with the crest of the Caldwell Foundation. I stared at it for a long time. A part of me wanted to rip it up, toss it into the fire, and forget their names forever. But another part stronger. Sharper knew this was the final act. The gala was being hosted at the Monarcha Grand Ballroom in the very mansion I now owned. They'd rented it for one night, unaware that the property had changed hands 2 months ago. My lawyer handled the transaction quietly. The irony was delicious. I decided I'd go, not in defiance. Not for drama, but to walk through that door not as a maid, but as the woman who owned it all. The night shimmered with lights and false laughter. People in tuxedos and evening gowns floated past me, unaware that the woman in the sleek black dress, hair pinned in soft waves, wasn't a socialite. They were standing in my foyer. I watched familiar faces swirl in and out of conversations. Some of them had barked orders at me years ago. Some hadn't looked me in the eye as I served hors d'oeuvres. All of them were now sipping champagne under my chandeliers. I made my entrance quietly. Yet every head turned. Power didn't shout. It whispered. At the far end of the ballroom, Julian was speaking at the podium. "Tonight we gather to honor legacy, to reflect on our values." I nearly laughed, but I stayed still. I wasn't there to humiliate him, not publicly, but someone else had other plans. A tap on the mic silenced the room. "Excuse me," said a woman in navy. "Before the speech continues, I'd like to thank the owner of this venue, Miss Alina Vega." All heads turned to me. A long pause. Then someone gasped. Julian's mouth parted. His eyes met mine, and this time they didn't look away. I stepped forward, slow and poised. "Thank you," I said into the microphone. "It's an honor to welcome you all to my home. Some of you may remember me as your housemaid, but tonight I host you as your landlord." Murmurs swept across the room. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't angry. I was free. I bought this mansion in cash, but I paid for it in a currency far more valuable: resilience. Silence. Then applause. Not just polite, genuine, because even the cruel admire. Survivaless, especially when it's elegant. Afterward, I slipped onto the balcony, away from the noise. Julian found me there, alone with the stars. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You never asked," I replied softly. He looked at me with something like wonder. You were always the one. No, I corrected. I became the one. And I did it without your name, your help, or your pity. He didn't argue. He just looked down. What now? He asked. Now. I exhaled. I build schools, women's shelters. I invest in girls who were told they'd never be more than someone's servant. That was my revenge, not pettiness, legacy. A few weeks later, I stood at the groundbreaking of my first school. A row of girls in crisp uniforms held signs that read, "Dignity is not a luxury." One of them, no older than 10, tugged on my dress. "Miss Alina," she asked, "is it true you used to scrub floors?" "Yes," I smiled. "And now I write policies. It's not where you start. It's what you choose to believe about yourself." She grinned. "Then I'll be president." I knelt down. "You already are, sweetheart. Start acting like it." Sometimes I still pass by the mirror and see the girl I used to be. Hair tied back, face tired. Dreams shelved. But then I smile. Because now she lives in a mansion no one thought she'd ever see Dot, and she owns every room.